Before I go to the screen share, I just wanted to let you know that this is going to be a work in progress for you. It takes some time. Be patient. It's a lot of fun. It's detective work. I have to tell you, I'm self-taught. I'm not a professional researcher. So if I can do it, you can do it. I've made it very simple. This is for the layperson. You know, there are always people you can hire to do really deep, deep dives, but this should give you enough to go by. Um, the information sometimes might seem limited, but because digitization is such a phenomenon and happening all of the time, history is very exciting these days because we keep discovering new things that have become available online because of digitization. So don't get discouraged if you can't find something right away. There will be other times, and sometimes it's just karma. It just pops up in front of you. Um, there's going to be a whole lot of information today. So the resource sheet that you're going to have access to from the library and from me will help you. All of the resources I mentioned are on that sheet, and Dan has also prepared a very good sheet. The one other tip I want to give, most of this you can do from the comfort of your home because so much is online. But I really, really encourage you to get out there, especially when you talk to neighbors, especially to long-standing neighbors. They have information you won't find anyplace else, and their stories are often priceless. Also, you might just happen to trip over something, particularly when it comes to maps. I encourage you to see the real thing rather than just the ones online because they're so filled with information. So we'll get started now. Let me share my screen. And we're going to start with a slide that really doesn't look like Scarsdale, but I chose it because it was the real estate office for Fox Meadow Estates, one of the earlier neighborhoods in your community. So here we have a map of an older map of Westchester on the left and a more contemporary one. What is so fabulous about our county is the diversity. Each community has its own personality. Each community has its own way of protecting, preserving, and promoting its history. What we at the Westchester County Historical Society are responsible for is the entire county. So we pick up the places that might not have availability to good stewardship, or that it's information that pertains to the county as a whole. Or we also, as you're going to hear more about, help maintain the records of certain communities that don't have the facility to do so. And interestingly, we have a very old county. So we also have a great sampling of all kinds of architecture and housing stock in Westchester. Of course, the development started in the south part of the county and gradually worked its way up. In Scarsdale, you have a stunning number of very early homes. I'm just showing the ones from the Scarsdale Historical website and some of the pictures from the Westchester County Historical Society, beginning with the Underhill House, which dates from 1687, and then the next three oldest, Cornell, Wayside Cottage, and the Griffin Fish House. And these aren't all. In fact, there's this wonderful map that's also online from the book Rural Church to Suburban Parish that shows the various houses and where they're located. You know, and I'd like to discuss it further with historians as to how so many in Scarsdale were preserved, because Scarsdale went through such an amazing upheaval with development, and that they were protected and survived is quite something. You also have a few houses from the late 1800s. These would be the shingle style and Queen Anne Victorian. Not as many as in other communities because Scarsdale didn't have a whole lot of people. There were only 885 souls in Scarsdale in the 1900 census. And so the houses were still from earlier times. There wasn't a huge building boom as there were in the surrounding communities that might have more examples of Queen Anne Victorian and shingle, New Rochelle, for example. But you do have some stunning example. Second Empire is the Rowsley Cottage, which was a very popular beginning in the 1880s, and a shingle style moving into more colonial revival that you see on the upper right. But what's really, really true to Scarsdale is revival. And that's true for most of the county because there was just such an amazing building boom in the 20s. It really started at the turn of the century, but it wasn't because the rail had improved enough and the new breed of American had become reality. That was the commuter, and people were discovering they could work in Manhattan, get on a train, and go to a less developed area in not far from the heart of Manhattan and into suburbia. And Westchester was one of the first and one of the most fashionable suburbs in the country. So this actually began at the turn of the century, but then with World War I, all of the construction was suspended. And when after the war, with a great sense of security and a great deal of wealth being made, there was just this extraordinary boom. And throughout Westchester and Scarsdale, the examples of colonial revival or eclectic colonial revival are with Spanish Mediterranean, Tudor revival, also known as the stockbrokers, Tudors. We have Georgian colonial revival, French Normandy revival. All of those revival styles came to be because American builders took the classical interpretations and made it America's own and gave it its own flair, even though you'll see the features like in a Tudor with the wood timbers and the chimney pots on these massive chimneys on the top and lots of gables, lots of nooks and crannies. Truly the Victorian, the Tudor style, they would put their own spin to these. And that's where we come to the term eclectic. I use that term a lot when I can't really pinpoint what a building is. Oh, it's an eclectic colonial revival. Often works. So the majority of Scarsdale, but then with the Depression and right on its heels, World War II, there was another halt. But land had been cleared, it had been deforested. So after World War II, our area, particularly southern Westchester, was prime for development, and the fast development that was needed to accommodate the hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young families and individuals who now had the benefit of the GI Bill, particularly northern New Rochelle and in Scarsdale. These large tracts that had once been farmland were immediately developed. And so we have a great number of examples of the post-World War II construction, the split ranch, the raised ranch, and again, a resurgence of colonial revival. We're now fine with the British. So colonial revival's A-OK, as is Tudor, as are all the other revival styles, but even a new spin. And then there are a few examples of more contemporary, and we come into the neoclassical that has been seen since the 80s and 90s as well. Okay, so if you're just starting out, you're new to the area, or you might not have really had time to dive into the history of our region, I recommend to get a bird's eye view. First with the county, your community, your neighborhood, and then your home. This is a great book, Westchester County History by Field Horn, and it was published by none other than the Westchester County Historical Society. And it's available in all the libraries. We also have it for sale on our website, and it gives a very good overview. As you see, the Bronx River Parkway is featured on its cover, and sure enough, Scarsdale's development had a lot to do with the Bronx River Parkway having been completed as the first parkway in America by the 20s and helping the great expansion of Scarsdale as a community. In general, there are books about every community in Westchester. Interestingly, I'm skipped over the Arcadia books, which are so popular. There's not one about Scarsdale yet, Jordan Copeland, but there could be. But you do have some other books just about Scarsdale that you can find at the library or in many of our libraries. We do have some of them, even if they're out of print, available at the Westchester County Historical Society as well. And speaking of the Scarsdale Historical Society, in addition to books, the best way to get to know your community is just hop online and look at the videos that have been produced by the Historical Society. The most recent one, How Scarsdale Came to Be, that Jordan Copeland did, is a wonderful overview of Scarsdale's history. And these videos are just really, really well done and cover a lot of history in a breezy, accessible way. So you can just go online and find these by going to the Scarsdale Historical Society. We'll hear more about that. This is what I call the Bible for Westchester County architecture. And even though it was written by Frank Sanchez, the wonderful Frank Sanchez, back in the late 1970s as part of the bicentennial experience, it is still very relevant today, and it covers the county's architecture from, as the title says, colonial to contemporary. It's really a terrific book. It's available in hardcover and paperback at libraries, and it's still being sold. It's not out of print. And then we have a number of books, some better than others, and these are three good ones. In particular, Field Guide to American Houses. That is my favorite, but the other two are quite good also if you're really investigating your house style. And if it's eclectic, it could have many styles that you want to delve into. And this is important if you're going to be doing changes to your house, because older houses, you want to preserve the intent of the builder, the intent of the architect, and be sure that the features that you're looking at on the exterior are maintained to keep the character and the integrity of the house as best possible. Ready to start sleuthing. You need your phone because it's got a camera on it, and that always helps. You don't need your own little scanner. You can use your phone. You also should have a notebook with a pencil. It doesn't need to be a Marimekko pencil. That's mine. Because when you go to archives, they prefer you to use a pencil. In fact, they require it because it's too easy to make a slip of a pen on an older document and not be able to erase it. So you'd like to bring a pencil along if you're going to be visiting an archive. I created a sheet. You don't need to, but this always helps me when I'm doing a house history to keep track of everything, particularly the Lieber number and the page number. That's supposed to say page underneath. Is very helpful in doing deed searches. And then I also include other notes. Just helps keep everything organized. It's not necessary, just helpful. And then you're going to identify the resources and sort of have a game plan of where you're going to go first or how you're going to sort of approach this. The government offices include the county clerk's office that you can visit either in person or online. And then the county archives, which is at the county record center. Your town hall, even though Scarsdale's a village, it's still called town hall. the Westchester County Historical Society, your public library, and in general, a municipal historical society and or a local historian. Interestingly, every community is mandated to have a municipal historian by New York state law. And some are more active than others. You happen to have somebody who's very active and very much a part and very willing to share his expertise. So you also have a terrific historical society and fabulous library. You'll hear more about those. So here's not a great picture of the county clerk's office, which is actually attached to the county office building in White Plains. You can go there in person if you're going to be getting a passport. You can go to the county clerk's office for that and do your research at the same time. It's so easy online, and after you pay for parking and everything, it's probably better to do it online. And the other is, and I'll talk about how you do that shortly. And here's a picture of the county archives and the Westchester County Historical Society building. This is a really unique and wonderful symbiotic relationship. We're under one roof. It's the public records that are maintained at the County Record Center in Elmsford and the county archives, which are the older records. And also our offices, the Westchester County Historical Society offices are here, as well as our vaults. And if you come on a Wednesday, you have one-stop shopping in our reading room. You let us know what you're planning on researching, and we have it ready for you. Around the county, libraries are often a really great starting point as well because of their local history room and their local history collections. And New Rochelle, we have the E.L. Doctorow Local History Room, which is open to anybody. It's a locked room, but you just get asked to be let in. And in it, there are atlases that pertain to the entire county. So, and there are other resources that you might want to access. On the top is Bronxville, the local history, the Historical Society's located in the Bronxville Library. Yonkers has their historical society at the Will Library. The picture on the left is the Greenberg Local History Room. And historical societies often have their own buildings, and they are frequently in a house museum. That would include Bedford up here, Hastings Historical Society, Terrytown, the Square House in Rye, the Ossining, and I can't remember which one this is, but they're all charming, and and you can visit a historic site while you're also visiting the Historical Society. When you do visit any of these, if you're not, Scarsdale Historical Society does not have a building, but if you happen to be visiting another community, I always say call first, make sure you have their hours and line up an appointment. So here is our website at the Westchester County Historical Society. It's westchesterhistory.com, and we have a page called Community Resources, and that gives the Historical Society historians contact information should you be investigating a place outside of Scarsdale. So back to the County Record Center in Elmsford, where I work, and what you can find here is help in doing your chain of owners through deeds. You can find maps and atlases, subdivisions, non-circulating books. We have vertical files. There's also Past Perfect, which is our online collections, the Historical Society's online collections. And we also have what we call oddities. If you get stuck with your deed search, if you get stuck needing land records, old deeds, meaning 1700s, 1800s, manumission papers, this is where you come to. And you make an appointment to use the reading room on a Wednesday. We're only have access to the reading room on Wednesdays right now. We lost a lot of volunteers during the pandemic who have not yet returned. but we're hoping to get our volunteer numbers up again so that we can offer another day. The Historical Society and the archives are all available by email. The Historical Society answers over 1,000 inquiries. My colleague, Patrick Raftery, who's our librarian, is just phenomenal. He wrote the 4-volume set, Cemeteries of Westchester. And in doing so, he learned not only where all the bodies are buried, but how to find them. He knows every community so well, and he can often access things. If you want to know about New Rochelle, I'm your go-to person. But I also know about the other parts of the county as well. We can help. Now, the first thing we're going to go to is a deed search. And you can do that from your own home. It does cost, there is a fee, $20, but you get it for 24 hours. So get your friends together, everybody who wants to do a deed search, and share your 24 hours. You can also do this at the county clerk's office for free. You can also do it at the Record Center that I was just showing you, our headquarters, on Wednesdays. You can also do it there for free. And what you're going to be able to do here is access the deeds as well as maps, subdivision maps, and other documents. But right now, we're just going to talk about the deeds. And we have, of course, a wonderful collection of maps. Some of these you're going to find at the Scarsdale Library in their quiet room where their local history collection is. And you're going to find many of these online. As I mentioned before, I do encourage you to see the real thing, because many of these are from large atlases. And even with a magnifying glass, you are going to have to really do some hunting. And the early ones are going to help you with who lived there, because they have the names of the big farms. And the property we're going to be looking at today is actually in one part of Scarsdale that I'm just trying to find it now myself. I've lost it. But where you see Scarsdale here and bordering on White Plains and Mamaroneck, and of course, New Rochelle. It's a little changed a bit. There are also these things called the Sanborn maps. There's only a few of Scarsdale, and I haven't seen any online, and I don't think they're going to be that helpful because they were done before, they started off before Scarsdale's development really took off. But I wanted to explain about the Sanborn maps. The Sanborn Company, located in Pelham, building is still there. It's a fabulous building with these great figures on the top. These insurance maps helped companies identify materials of buildings. So they were color coded. The yellow meant wood, the red, which is now pink because they faded, were brick buildings. There were stone buildings, and they were all laid out. So these are very helpful, particularly when you're getting stuck on finding when a building actually was erected and what its original materials were. Yes, this is a microfilm machine. Nobody likes them, but and many of the microfilm rolls have been digitized now. But interestingly, it really is a true preservation treatment, because microfilm is one of the few things that has not changed. It's been film and it still stays film unless it turns to vinegar, but it gets duplicated, reproduced. So if it is beginning to turn to vinegar or smell like vinegar, and there are still things on microfilm that have not been digitized yet. And so we have microfilm. One of them are the Sanborn, one of the categories are Sanborn maps. And here's another relic from the past, card catalog. I love them, and we still have ours. And we have all of our materials at the Westchester County Historical Society on cards in the card catalog. So you go to look up Scarsdale, and there's all the cards that will tell you what we have in terms of books, manuscripts, ephemera, which are booklets or pamphlets, everything that we have in our collection with its number, you can find in the card catalog. We also have an online collection. When you go to our website and you hit collections, you go to Past Perfect, which is our online collections database. This has what we have in our catalog to a degree. There are over 100,000 items digitized and available online. We have hundreds of thousands more to go. It's a process. We're constantly digitizing. Our trained volunteers are constantly digitizing, cataloging, and getting it up online. And you can search this by going to keyword search. Here is the little box. If you only want images, you hit the little box, the box for just images, and you put in keywords. If there are more than one word that you want to apply to all, you put it in quotation marks. And up comes, if you do Scarsdale, thousands of images, postcards, also listings of the ephemera and the books we have about Scarsdale or wherever. This is a sneak peek at our vaults. We have shelving that is equivalent to 215 football field lengths, filled with books and boxes and all properly, professionally archived. Here's the shelf with one shelf with some of Scarsdale materials. There are also these boxes that contain ephemera, such as this. This is just one example of a real estate brochure. I love these real estate brochures. In the 20s, this was the thing to do. They often had auctions, or they would just be auctioning off lots, or they created these brochures to entice people to come out for a day in the country, the suburbs, to look for a home. So here was the brochure for Heathcote Crest. And what's nice about this is that they also include sometimes pictures of the houses and the actual lots, all divvied up with the numbers on them. So you can see how it was originally laid out. I found in our clipping files, we also have big vertical files that came, some from Scarsdale Historical Society that we're now preserving for them. And our vaults are temperature controlled. We have the full-time librarian, so we can always access these materials. This is just one example of a brochure that I found for an actual building home. There are plenty others, hundreds of different items. So now we're going to pick an example. I should back up a little bit that I first developed this program as a general guide to how to research your Westchester house. And then a number of communities asked me to tailor it for their community, and each community is different. It's a different process. There's not one for the entire county. So I've created one for Greenberg, for Ossining, for Yonkers, for New Rochelle, Chappaqua, and every single one has been different. And in each, I find the best way to do it is to pick a house and actually walk you through how I would go about researching it. And fortunately, I usually pick one that's on the market. But Jordan Copeland, your historian, town historian, graciously offered his house. So here's Jordan's house at 45 Woods Lane, and on we go. So the first thing, the deeds, the chain of ownership. And the first thing I did was go online to the Scarsdale property portal. You just go to the municipal government site, and you're going to see property assessors, and it will take you right to the building cards. And in this, I could find the Lieber number for the book and the deed page, and I immediately write them down. It gives you the first 4 owners. Not always, and sometimes they'll give you more, but it gives you at least back into the 1990s. And so this is all important information that you put in your notebook. And then we go to the Westchester County Clerk's website. And this again is where you can do it online yourself for a fee, or you can use the one at the record center, or you can have a deed party. Everybody's going to do the research. And you start off by signing in. And then we luckily knew the name of the person whose house we were going to be looking at, Copeland. If I didn't know the person's name of the house that I'm researching, I'd go online and just type in the address. And then the real estate brochures help me, because even if the house isn't online, these realtors have extensive web information that often includes the people who live there and have lived there. It will include the style of the house. Sometimes it says old instead of what the style is. Not always accurate information, but you can get it online. We know who we're looking for, and we actually know we could put in search by number, because that sheet that we just saw gave the deed book and the deed page number. But we're going to do it the old-fashioned way and just put in the name of the person here, Copeland. You put in the city or the town. You don't have to fill out everything else, because you're going to get to it pretty quickly. And so this is what I found, the deed from Elliot Bennett Guerrero and Karen Bagan to Jordan Copeland and Lisa Copeland. And I'm showing you the entire deed, which fortunately has been transcribed, is all in typed, because it's the further back you go, then it becomes longhand. And this is just basic information. Again, part of the deed and who signed it, and the whereas and where for and all that. And then what's really the interesting part is what's at the end, because they give the parameters of the property. And sometimes these deeds will include all of the former owners. This one, no, but it does tell you that they gives you the lot, block, and lot number. And it also gives you the dimensions. I'm not going to tell you about meets and bounds. Oops, there's the same thing. So then from there, we're just going to go backwards. We have the name of the person who sold it to the Copelands. So the next search will be going to them. And we see a couple of deeds and a couple of mortgages. So we look each of the deeds up, and we come up with the deed from Lisa Dodge to Elliot Bennett Guerrero. He and his wife were moving from Christopher Street. And this was in 2001. And then we go back to Dodge now. And boy, Lisa Dodge had a lot of transactions, and a little confusing because I had to determine which was the property. I had to go through a few to find our property. I could go back and get that Lieber and page number, or you could just open each of the deeds to match up the property with the one that you're investigating. They had a number of houses and a number of properties. So from there, oops, I did have this on, but it disappeared. We have the Berg to Warren. So it was sold to Warren Dodge and Lisa Dodge from Andrew Berg. I had their deed there. And then even before that, we're going back to, in their deed, there were the covenants given. And the covenants were not in the more recent deeds, But the covenant was referred to in the more recent deeds and gave this deed number. And the covenant says, the party of the second part for himself, his heirs, and assigns covenants and agrees that neither he nor his heirs or assigned shall or will erect or maintain or permit to be erected or maintained upon any portion of the said premises any type of building whatsoever than the dwelling houses for the use and occupancy of one family, which will not cost less than $12,000 each, except garage or other appropriate structure. This was a fairly general covenant that you'll see in a lot of the developments. Some of the developments in Scarsdale were more restrictive, but the covenant in giving a house price in that way was laying out the ground rules as to who was going to be able to live in that particular development. So then we continue. Now, if it's previous to 1967, you have to do the search a little differently. You have to go to an index book. And that I'm going to show you. We're still going backwards from the Bergs to Ulf Nielsen and Barbara Nielsen. And then from there, we're going to go to look for the Nielsens. And we come to Frida McGrath Mendelsohn selling to Ulf Nielsen in 1978. And then we have to go from Mendelsohn because she sold it, she purchased it before 1966. We're going to go to the index book. Just bear with me. And by the way, there are instructions on the site. So if you, if I'm have to do this sort of, I can't do this online because it's too risky. So I've just captured it. So what you're going to do, and if it's too confusing, you can follow those directions, but you're going to go to the index book and type in the name of the person who owned it before 1966 and determine grantor or grantee. And then you go to the index book and you look down to find them, and there they are right there at the top. And here's the Lieber number and here's the page number. And at the bottom, that's where you'll find a place to type in the Lieber number and page number, hit deed, and it will take you right to the deed, which is here. So here we have the deed from Aaron Ginsberg to between Frida McGrath Mendelsohn selling to Aaron Ginsberg to Frida McGrath Mendelsohn in 1964. Here's another deed. This is from Mr. Mendelsohn to Frida Mendelsohn. This is a thing that's done typically to set up a trust or by the executor after somebody has died. Here we're going back to Edna Guild to Aaron Ginsberg. The same property line is explained here, and also the covenant is mentioned to be included still at this point. And then we take it back to Ole Larson, who had sold it to Morton Guild in 1929. Now I'm copying down all of this different information as we go along in the chart. And whatever I find in the deed that might be something unusual or something that needs some investigation. And then the last I find the Eisner Stevens Company to Ole Larson in February 26, 1926. So we go back, he had it for 3 years. And I'm already interested because he bought it very early, 1926. I do know that the Eisner Stevens Company was the result of Scarsdale Woods. And before we go, there is a map that's mentioned in all of these deeds. That's map 3049. So before we leave the county clerk's online, we're going to go, instead of to land records where we found the deed, we're going to go to maps. And I just type in the map number that's mentioned on the deed in the town of Scarsdale. and this is the subdivision. Its subdivision is called Scarsdale Woods. The Eisner Stevens was, I'm not really sure what the relationship is, but throughout Westchester, the Eisner Stevens Corporation took over some of these initial developments. And here you see on the subdivision map, here's Drake Road, here's Forest Lane, Woods Lane. So that's a subdivision map. But now we're going to look at the other maps because they're fascinating. And also, they'll give you a lot of information. And the first one I pulled offline just so that you could see the different neighborhoods in Scarsdale and where your house is in relation to them if you're not familiar with the way the neighborhoods are all divided in Scarsdale. The names are not the same as the original developments. And here we come back to the 1867 Beers Atlas. And then we have a Bromley Atlas. Now, these were big books, and Scarsdale's just one page in the Bromley 1881. And here you have the Scarsdale right here, and you can see there's so few people. I mean, in 1900, 9 years later, there are only 885 people living. So it's very sparsely developed. So it's primarily farms. Here's the White Plains Road. You see just a few roads have already been put in. And pretty soon, those are going to be all divided up. Here's the 1900 Atlas, still not too many, but you see that some of these farms have more than one owner. And you already see here Scarsdale Estates. You see here Scarsdale Estates. Whoops, hit that too hard. Scarsdale Estates. Charles Butler, that all would become Fox Meadow. Here's the Boston Post Road. I mean, the Old White Plains Road. Sorry, wrong side of the county. Up into White Plains, and you can find the owner of your property early on before you do much more of your search. Here's Scarsdale Estates here, and our property is over in this area, I think. And here we have the 1911. Now you're seeing even more development. We have the Quaker Realty Company. We have this realty company, still a number of farms because it's 1911, but it's beginning to, here's Quaker Ridge Park already divided up into the lots. This one has already been divided up into the lots. If we could morph these maps, it would just be absolutely fascinating. And here we come to the 1930s, and you see it's pretty much, very much been subdivided. And here we have Drake Road, and here is Scarsdale Woods, and here we have Woods Lane. Still not all, but there are a few houses color-coded, just like the Sanborn map, and ours is in here, someplace on Woods Road. And you see all the other different developments going on. It's so interesting. And you can still see the names of different people who own the bigger estates. We already talked about the Sanborn maps. And again, they're not going to be as helpful to you. This happened to have been Chappaqua. So now we've left the Record Center and we're going to go to your town hall. It's not necessary, but if you don't want to do things online, if you rather the human connection, you can go here, and you never know what you're going to find out and who you're going to talk to that might know something about your property. So I had actually called the building department to see if I could look for, in some communities, they have cards that have all the permitting on them. Some of it's been digitized, not always. And sometimes those cards have the architect. And I asked if such a thing existed. They said everything is online on this one computer right outside the building office. So I went here and there was somebody using it. So I waited. And apparently somebody had changed the paper size because the printer was jammed. But that's okay. It just gave me an idea of what I could find. And this was what you find. Welcome to Villages Scarsdale public portal. And for the building search, I put in the address, and up came these different documents. They don't give you the name, so you have to go through each one. And the numbers don't correspond to dates. So you'll have to go through each one. And these happen to be all the permits that have been issued, but not from the early times. I was able to find the original certificate of occupancy, though it was a little hard to read. But I could see the first name is old. And we had already determined that that was the first owner after the development company. So he is the builder. No architect is listed, and they didn't always have architects for the buildings. And this was September 24th, 1928 was when the certificate of occupancy was issued. So then I went down to the assessor's office where I met Margaret, and she's delightful. And she did email me some of the cards. I also knew I could get them online, but she made it very easy. If you pay 25 cents, she'll print them out, or she'll email it to you. You can call ahead or email the assessor's office. And it's always nice to have the person-to-person interaction. And again, sometimes you'll run into somebody who knows something. You say you're researching your house, and if it's somebody who's been around for a while, they might have information you would not find online. And so this is what I found at the assessment office. There was one assessment card back when Frida McGrath Mendelsohn owned the house back in the 30s. And then this is a more current one that gave different updates to the house. This was all for the assessor to do the tax appraisal. And you can see Jordan Copeland's there on the top. And then you can also do this online. And this is what happens when you pop up. You can actually type in the name of the person. You go to the municipal website and go to the pros property search. It will ask for the name or the address. It didn't come up for the address with me, but it came up for the name. And it gives the building style. And unfortunately, they've got it right. It's not just old, because I've seen that, or very bizarre things, but it is colonial revival. Gives some basic information. And it also gives the appraisal and more information. And here's the different permitting work that was available, the layout for the property. And again, this is what we already saw, the different owners and the Lieber and page number, which will be very helpful when you're looking for who were the people who lived in my house. Now, couldn't be a real rabbit hole. In fact, that's why it usually takes me 10 to 12 hours to do these programs of research, because I get so involved with the discovery. It's so much fun. If you have somebody that does genealogy and really enjoys it, you can enlist their help, or you can just sort of work your way through it. and hope that you don't get too involved. But you have a lot of resources at your fingertips, particularly as Scarsdale residents. And these are the kinds of things you can find: the birth, marriage, and death records, census, the land and tax we already went through, probate that you find at the record center, church records, a little harder, passenger lists, a whole slew of things. Historic newspapers are going to help you. Now, there are online ancestry websites that you can get for free for a fee. Some of them have free trials, so you can go for a week and then decide. Be sure to unsubscribe if you're not interested. Some libraries have this ancestry in the for library use. Yonkers, for example, and in Yonkers at Riverfront, they have ancestry help every other Monday. So you can access all of the different websites for free and get some help from their reference librarians. So, or you can go to the Scarsdale Public Library where Dan is, and other librarians, but he's your main guy for local history. And when you walk in the library, you're going to make a right past the cafe into the quiet room, which has the local history and some great exhibits. Here's the local history resources guide condensed for the PowerPoint that Dan has prepared and will have available to you. So you see that it has different online resources. I also created one for you that has genealogy resources, some of which are free, like Family Search, and other ways to access that information about the people. Now, the upstairs of the library, of course, has the books, has maps, has a lot of resources. Then downstairs is where the archives are. This is not generally accessible to the public, but if you're looking for things in particular and you make an appointment with Dan, he can go down to the room and access the vertical files that they have. The librarians used to clip from newspapers before digitization. They would actually sit and clip. The clipping file at the New Rochelle Public Library is just unbelievable, and I use it constantly, because our Standard Star, our weekly newspaper, hasn't been digitized yet. You're luckier, because on the right, you see the bound volumes of the Scarsdale Enquirer. It has been digitized, thankfully, and thanks to funding by the Scarsdale Historical Society. And here's just the pamphlet index, what you can find. It's been added into, so it's been updated even more recently. He knows where all of this stuff is. You can find the clippings there, as well as the books. And also so many resources on the Scarsdale Historical Society website, including all those videos that I showed you before, including access to the Scarsdale Enquirer, and access, links to other resources. It's a really wonderful relationship between the Historical Society and the library. The Historical Society was very, very smart. It costs so much money to maintain a historic house, and it's nearly impossible to do so in this day and age, because you can't get school buses to come, and you can't get volunteers to operate it. And there are so many colonial historic houses in Westchester. They instead used funding from the sale of their historic site to digitize. And this makes the history far more accessible. It's hats off. It was a great idea. And their materials, the hard copies, are safely kept and accessible through the Westchester County Historical Society. And in partnering with the Scarsdale Library, they digitized so much of it. And Scarsdale's part of the Southeast Library Resources Council, which has a relationship with New York Heritage Digital Collections. The same with New Rochelle Library. We set that up when I used to work there because it is a huge, well-run, professionally run online database of historical records for colleges, universities, historical societies, libraries, and you can get so much information. So Scarsdale Public Library partnered and has on the New York Heritage Digital Collection documents. This is actually the library's website, and Dan will fill in whatever I've missed. These are different things that have been digitized and that will take you to the New York Heritage site. And speaking of digitizing newspapers, we come to newspapers and dailies that are online and searchable. And this is where, oh my gosh, it was such a thing to get Scarsdale Enquirer digitized. It is searchable. You just put a name in. I put in 42 Woods Lane in quotation marks. And on Woods Lane, just putting Woods Lane in, I got over 2,000 different citations. It is like a time capsule of a suburban community because the Scarsdale Enquirer covered everything: graduations, who's in ROTC, marriages, obituaries, sewer work, a cat in the tree, who got a $5 fine for speeding, everything. It's a time capsule. The debutante, who was at the Holly Ball for debutantes. And it takes you right up to 1977. So you can find a whole lot of information about the people that lived in your house in earlier years. And if not, it's just a wonderful glimpse into Scarsdale, life in Scarsdale. There are other historic newspapers. The New York State Historic Newspaper site is free, and there are these different Westchester newspapers. The New Rochelle Pioneer, which only went up to 1920. You might find information about early Scarsdale residents. The Eastern State Journal, which is published in White Plains, but covered all of Westchester between 1845 and 1918, might also have some information about those from that time period in Scarsdale. Now, anybody can get a New York Public Library card and access their articles and databases online. This has been a tremendous resource for historians. I have been using it since the pandemic to access the New York Age newspapers, which were the African American newspapers for our area, as well as the Anti-Slavery Standard. It's been digitized. And New York Times, if you don't have a subscription to the New York Times, you can access the New York Times archives using a New York Public Library card. And if you do have a New York Times subscription, you can access the archived articles as well, just from using your subscription. There's also a very interesting Old Fulton, New York. It's one gentleman pictured here who has been digitizing and digitizing and digitizing. It's sometimes a little tricky to navigate, but you can get a tutorial on it. And there's all kinds of interesting things that can pop up on Old Fulton, New York. And it's worth a look when you're investigating something in Westchester. Newspapers.com by Ancestry is with a fee. You can get a free trial. Again, be sure you unsubscribe or you will be charged. And it has a number of newspapers that they have paid that they include on their site that have been digitized. And again, Scarsdale Enquirer, we already discussed that, and it is just a wealth of information. Here, for example, I put in one person's name, the guild, and we have his obituary here, and find that he was the manager of Easy Washing Machine Corporation and died commuting. He was going from New York to Syracuse, where he had lived before, so it wasn't really commuting, but I think his business took him also to Syracuse, and he was only 45. Now, directories. These were published beginning in the late 1800s, even though people didn't have phones. And once they started having phones, the phone numbers would be included. They're a wealth of information, and Scarsdale was included in the White Plains directories. And there are few White Plains directories around. There's some at your library, the Scarsdale Library. There's some at the White Plains Library. We have some at the Historical Society, or you can get them online. Heritage Quest online is one of these ancestry genealogy sites. Both Yonkers and New Rochelle public libraries have subscriptions, so you can access it with your library card, or you can access it on a computer in those libraries. And I went here to look in the directories for some of the families. And sure enough, here's Morton Guild, or I guess that's how you pronounce his name. It says living in White Plains, but it was actually Scarsdale. And then when I went to the view the record, up comes the pages. This was from 1928-29 Polk. And they have such good information because they give the name of the wife, it gives what his job was, where it was, New York, and his address. This just says Woods near Forest Lanes. They hadn't named Woods Lane at that point. That would come later, and I found that in the Scarsdale Enquirer when it got its name. They have, so you get a lot of information. Sometimes they have people's children's names. Like here, there's Glendinning John Jr. student who lived at 29 Circle Road. So you can pull a lot of information from this. It also includes the servants who lived in the house. Here's the chauffeur, where he lived and who he was chauffeuring for, the cook who lived at 8 Rectory Lane. It gives quite a bit of information. Now, where can I look for pictures or plans of my house? You have this great book in the library at the Scarsdale Library, Colette Construction Corporation Engineers and Builders. This was done in 1928. These were mostly large Tudor and French Normandy kinds of buildings, stone, slate roof, some of the larger buildings. There are a few of these kinds of construction books in the library. This one is also available online from Google Books, and you can download it. I had downloaded a picture, but I didn't quite get it on the screen. It shows the plans, sometimes the floor plans, the house, who lived there, and who the architect was. So this is enormously helpful, particularly with the higher end sort of buildings that were done in the 20s. So back to the Westchester County Historical Society website, we have a lot of photographs, some digitized that were from the Scarsdale Historical Society collection, and also some of our own. When I put in keyword Scarsdale, there's over 1,500 results, beginning with books, ephemera, as well as pictures. I found not a picture of 45 Woods Lane, but one of 41 Woods Lane. And unfortunately, many of the pictures aren't dated, but you can sort of tell if there are no trees in front that it was probably pretty early. The trees had to grow in first. So you can sort of judge, and it's a lot of fun to find the picture of your house. Oh, here's the one I found of, this is 41 Woods Lane. Sorry, Jordan, no 45, but you probably already knew that. Then there's another, which is one of the oddities. A number of Sears homes were constructed, and there are two sites, searshome.org and searsarchives.com. If you just Google Sears homes, I found this particular home in Scarsdale that was patterned after this model. It was called the Honor House. So in the 20s, Sears actually had in their catalog these patterns, and these were purchased and put up. There were over 100 that I found in Yonkers. So it's hard to tell the difference. You know, they had builders come in. It's just that they used a pattern book. Interesting, Wanamaker's also got into this, but it was very short-lived. It was called a motorhome. And the brochure, which we have in the Historical Society, says the home comes even stocked with dinner. It came already done with food in the cabinets, but it was short-lived. Not the same kind of survival rate as the Sears homes. Very interesting, and quite a few in Westchester County. You can see it followed exactly the pattern. So there are two houses that are just about doing house histories that I recommend. Discovering the history of your house that you can find in the library. If it's not at Scarsdale, you can get it through the system, as well as an Uncommon Cape, which was done about a Westchester house. Pretty much everything I've covered. I also encourage you to find the style of your house by using the American Field Guide. Our house that we were looking at, 45, I would call eclectic colonial revival, and that it was very much a pattern of revival of colonial, but with the center gable, it becomes slightly different. So that would have been colonial, eclectic colonial revival. And then here's my information. Feel free to contact me, Barbara@westchesterhistory.com. I am going to send my resource list to Dan, so he'll have it available, but you can also email me and I'm happy to send that to you. Here's the way you can access the county archives if you want to make an appointment for the records, the reading room, one-stop shopping for both of us. You go to the archives.westchestergov.com. And we're celebrating 150 years this year, and coming up, not this week, but next, our inaugural site for our 150th exhibit, which shows on a big monitor many of our treasures from our collection, will be at your library. So I hope you stop in and take a look at it. It will be there for the month of February, and we'll have all kinds of activities, including a family history aunt this summer that will get you out and get you to all the different communities and enjoy history as a family. So that ends the program. I think we have few enough people to not have to do chat, but instead, if you have a question, raise your hand. Is that okay with you, Dan?
Yeah, if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can unmute yourself.
Oh, there are a few questions already. Will we be able to receive a recording of the presentation?
Yes, I answered in the chat.
Oh, you did already.
You will be able to, everyone who registered will get an email early next week that will include all the resources, including a recording of the program.
Jordan, if you're on, can you unmute and let us know what you think? Did you learn anything?
Yeah, let's see. I'm here, figure out how to do this. Yeah, I don't know. Yes, I mean, I don't know with any more specificity. I'll just say for anybody, it's really fun to go back and forth between like the deeds and the newspapers and ancestry. That's sort of like my like golden triangle because then you like learn more like um the people who won't show up in the deeds are like the servants and the children, which is really cool, especially when you're in a house that by modern standards does not feel all that large and there's like two unrelated people who also happen to live there back when, you know, labor was cheap and there was a lot of people immigrating and working in kind of service stuff. So Yeah, but yeah, it was great. Definitely all great stuff. I mean, you can go down any of these rabbit holes and it's super fun.
Well, thanks. And thanks, everybody. Jordan is doing just such a fabulous job. You're very lucky to have such a good municipal historian, a great municipal historian, and a really great historical society and library. You've got all the bases covered. No excuse to get out there and has certainly so much information that's covered. And I understand the Harwood building is going to be next on the agenda.
I think like all of downtown, we're working on a film about all of the development of downtown Scarsdale. So we're putting the finishing touches on that now, and that's going to be really interesting because it's downtown Scarsdale, and 100 years ago it was like nothing. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure.
amazing how new a community it is because it does seem age old and so much happened in that one in the 100 years. It's
Mhm.
just the rapid change from the 20s to today is really quite significant. So, any other questions?
I just wanted to point out, you might already know if you're in this program, but you can see how important the Scarsdale Inquirer is for a lot of this research. And we learned a couple of weeks ago that it's indefinitely suspended publication. Um, so uh, there, I don't know specifics, but I know that there are members of the community talking about what to do about this. And if you want to get involved, um, I'm not sure where exactly you should go, but keep your ears open because it's such an invaluable resource for recording the history of a community. Um, and it would be a shame if there was nothing like that happening anymore.
Absolutely. It's your paper of record. And I can tell you from experience, without a daily newspaper, there's no way that our history gets recorded and it doesn't have to be big history. I mean, you can always get things online that have been archived, but the small things are the one things that are so important. And that's really, really sad. It also the Inquirer, connects everybody. It's would be a shame, would be a real shame.
Um, and then just finally, if you are looking for the architect of your house, it, it can be very, very hard to find that. And um, I'm not going to have anything in those files in the basement. It's very unlikely that I'm going to have that information there. I think your best bet is to find out who owned the house first, follow that back, and then use that information to look into the Scarsdale Inquirer and see if there were any articles about the building of the house. And the possibility is there that an architect might also be mentioned.
Those construction booklets sometimes have the architect, but you're absolutely right. And just for example, with 45 Woods Lane, there wasn't an architect, there was a builder. And so many of the houses were from pre-done plans, and then the owner would just change their look at the plan and make a few adjustments, but there was no architect of record necessarily. But you're absolutely right. Some of the Inquirer articles tell the builder and or the architect, and that's a good source. Well, thank
Any
you,
other
everybody.
questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Barbara. That was fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Okay, have a good rest of the weekend.
You too. Bye.